So much, Kate. All right, bear with me. I'm going to share my screen. Little new to this, but should work. Okay. Beginning. All right. Is this, everybody can see this?
Yep, that looks great.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to, quote, see all of you without actually seeing any of you. But I am very pleased to be giving the keynote at Grasp's event today, and I have my deepest thanks to Kate and Lindsay for inviting me to speak again. So this is a slightly very special edition of my Sexuality and the Spectrum talk. Normally when I give this, it is a lot longer and there's a lot more information crammed in, but this is a very special coronavirus edition of Sexuality and the Spectrum, lessons on sex, dating, and love, autism style. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you get something good out of this. So just a little overview of some of the topics we're going to touch on here, because Kate mentioned in the mailings and things that went out that I was going to be talking about being an autism sexuality advocate. So I'm going to share with you why I became an autism sexuality advocate, kind of what was the journey to get to this point, what brought me here, what made me want to pursue this particular line of work, and everything that I've been doing leading up to this point. And then I'm going to talk about a new job that I actually just started last week at Rutgers as a relationship coach in the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services. So this is just a heck of a time to start a new job, right? You know, you want to get into routines and rhythms, and that's just not happening in any shape or form right now. So I'm doing my best to adjust, and I'm excited to be working in the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services in this capacity, working on sexuality education. So I'll be sharing some of that with you. And then we're going to talk about autism relationships and the coronavirus. What does it mean in this time of social isolation to try to build relationships, try to form relationships? How do we reframe that when we're dealing with social isolation? And then, of course, we'll have time for questions at the end, plenty of time for questions. So make sure you have them ready, and I'll be happy to answer them. So just a little bit about me, a little by way of background. Again, I am a relationship coach at the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services, brand spanking new. I'm also the founder and president of Ascot Consulting, which is my own business that I started in 2010, and I'm a certified autism specialist. I'm a professional speaker. I've traveled all over the world to give presentations about autism and sexuality, which I hope to be doing again very soon once this is all past us. I've given 2 TEDx talks, and I've spoken twice at the United Nations for World Autism Awareness Day, most recently in 2018. Just a couple months ago, I was featured as a guest expert on Slate.com's How to Do It sex advice column. I actually was emailed by the man, there's a guy and a girl who do the column, and they had a question from an autistic adult, and he obviously didn't have the background in that, and so emailed me and asked me to serve as a guest expert. So I was very happy to do that. And I've had my writing published in a lot of places, and I serve on several different boards of different autism organizations at the moment. And I'm writing The Naughty Audie, which is a memoir of my experiences with dating and relationships as a woman on a spectrum. No better time for book writing than a quarantine. So I'm in good shape the next couple of weeks. So what exactly is an autism sexuality advocate, right? I did a Google search to see if there was a definition already existing. Big surprise, there wasn't. This is really not something that has ever existed before now. And so I came up with this definition on my own, which is that an autism sexuality advocate is someone who advocates for the right of individuals on the autism spectrum to be recognized as sexual beings and to have equal access to with the accurate and comprehensive sexual education being given to their neurotypical peers. In a nutshell, a very large nutshell, that is what an autism sexuality advocate is to me. And this is obviously something, again, that this is new. We're still working on just trying to get people on the spectrum recognized as sexual beings, let alone, you know, the advocacy piece, which is, again, just, you know, it's all kind of new and exciting. And so this is something that really, it's not like you could look into the past and see what have other autism sexuality advocates done in years past. There really aren't a lot of previous examples to go by. And it's very scary. I don't want to call myself a pioneer, but I feel that I'm sort of blazing my trail, not the only trail, but a trail that is mine. And I don't necessarily have other examples to look to in terms of what I'm going to do and where this is going to take me. So my journey has been anything but a straight line. And so what led me to becoming a sexuality advocate? Again, looking back now in my life, I could say, yeah, I kind of saw this coming. I started writing erotic fiction when I was a teenager. I always felt comfortable talking about sex and sexuality. It came very naturally to me. I had curiosities at the same age as my neurotypical peers. I should add, by the way, I was diagnosed as being on the spectrum at the age of 11. And so I had those same interests and curiosities, but I did not have the social opportunities to explore those curiosities, which as a result made me start writing. And I read a lot as well. I was voraciously reading, lots of erotica, not really fully understanding everything that was happening there, but it was my way of accessing my burgeoning sexuality when I had no other outlets to do so. So I always just had that I never felt any sense of shame around talking about sex, really. I mean, there was a lot maybe I didn't fully understand, but I always it never was something that I felt bothered by. And so consequently, when I started going for my master's degree, which by the way, I actually have a master's degree in ABA, and I extremely respectfully disagree with Dana about it being autistic conversion therapy. Obviously, there are very nefarious origins, and I do not agree with Ivar Lovaas on a great many things. But I sought to do something very different when I was pursuing this line of study, which was to teach adults on the spectrum how to ask someone out on a date. And that was not something that existed in the research literature, right? This was everybody else who, was in my classes was working with early intervention. I didn't get along with kids when I was a kid. So let the people who are good at that do that. I knew that there was a lack of services for adults on the spectrum, especially in this area, especially in the area of dating skills. So this was something that I specifically chose to focus on. And it was just kind of another rung in the ladder leading me to becoming an autism sexuality advocate, which really kind of kicked off when I did my first presentation on autism and sexuality in 2012. So I've actually been presenting professionally since 2005, 6. And I started speaking on panels when I was 14 years old, but the sexuality piece didn't come into play until 2012. And I started doing it with Dr. Peter Gerhardt, who some of you may know. He's a very dear friend of mine, and he has been, talking about this stuff longer than anybody else I can think of. And so when I started doing the presentations with him, he would do the kind of professional clinical side, and I would do the personal side. I would talk about my personal experiences with dating and relationships, which again, I had no issue with doing. But since then, my presentation has evolved. I talk about not only my personal experiences, but also about the study that I conducted for my master's degree. I talk about strategies, how can we have discussions about sexuality and relationships. And so it's really taken off since then. And I initially started my business, Ascot Consulting, to be a college coach for students on the spectrum. I'm also a certified college coach, which I obtained through Bank Street College and Dr. Linda Geller. But the sexuality thing has really taken off since 2012. There's a lot of people who are doing college stuff, higher ed stuff, not a lot of people doing sex stuff. So it's really just exploded in the intervening years, and has become the thing that I've just become extremely passionate about. And I guess is what drew the good folks at Rutgers to me and made them want to hire me. So I'm very grateful for that. So that's kind of the evolution of my becoming an autism sexuality advocate. Again, these pieces taken separately, oh, my hand was really big there, sorry, may not, have ultimately led to this conclusion, but then you kind of look at them in that linear manner and it's like, yeah, okay, I can see how she ended up doing that, I mean, it's either that or teaching masturbation classes at the Y. I don't know. No, but I wasn't going to do that. No, that's not me. Anyway, the point is that I am now an autism sexuality advocate. It was a journey to get here, but I'm very glad to be here and to keep going with this work. And so at the moment, there are still not a lot of things out there for teaching about sexuality. There's stuff for neurotypicals, right? So you have ASECT, which is the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. That is an organization that serves the general public. It's for people to become certified as sexuality educators. But again, it's not specifically geared toward autism. It's definitely more of a generalized thing. And then there's an organization called Elevatus Training, which I learned about somewhat recently, run by a woman named Catherine McLaughlin. And it actually does specialize in sexuality education for people with developmental disabilities. Ms. McLaughlin is physically disabled, and that's how she kind of got her start in doing this. And now she offers these trainings in person and online that are geared toward working with people with IDD. And, but again, I don't know if it's specific. I haven't taken the trainings myself, so I can't speak to how much of autism is covered in that realm. And as we know, there are certainly plenty of challenges that people with physical disabilities face when dealing with sexuality and relationships, but there are a whole other set of different circumstances that individuals on the spectrum may face. And so it's still a very, very, very under-researched, under-discussed area. And we definitely need a lot more out there than what we currently have. Being part of the Rutgers Center for Adult Autism Services, Rutgers at the moment actually has a program called Answer, and it is the most comprehensive sexual education program either in the state of New Jersey or even the country. I'm not sure which, but it's been around for like 40 years, and it's meant to educate teenagers about sex and sexuality and relationships and all that stuff. And so what I'm looking to do, at least now here at the outset of my time at the RCAS, is reviewing Answer, looking at what they have on their site there and looking how can we incorporate some of this into programming that's specifically geared toward Rutgers students on the spectrum and Rutgers community members on the spectrum. So that's kind of the preliminary goal at the moment. It's looking at that, and also looking at, for those who don't know, OAR, the Organization for Autism Research, has just recently put out a guide called Sex Ed for Self-Advocates. It's geared toward folks on the spectrum. And so looking at these two things that are in existence and what can we pull from them and how can we do something to serve this community at Rutgers, which is a huge community, because Rutgers actually has one of the most comprehensive support programs for students on the spectrum of any university in the country. And so I'm very happy to be on board and doing this. So it's still very early. Obviously, I don't have more to tell you right now because I've only been working there a week, but I'm really excited to be doing this. And I think a lot of great things are going to come out of this. And I really want to commend the folks at Rutgers for hiring an adult on the spectrum myself, because obviously the best way, to be helping these students is to have, someone who's been there, who's been through perhaps what they've been through. And so I'm hopeful to be bringing something really positive to Rutgers on that account. So love in the time of coronavirus. Okay, so now when we're thinking about what's happening right now, there's a lot happening right now. And we were hearing terms thrown around like social isolation, social distancing, and I just want to give a little clarity on those terms. I know some of this has been touched on already by our previous wonderful speakers, so I don't want to repeat too much, but the definition of social isolation, from what I could find, is that it is a state of complete or near complete lack of contact between an individual and society. It differs from loneliness, which reflects temporary and involuntary lack of contact with other humans in the world. So many of us can attest to feeling loneliness, right? When I started hearing the term social isolation thrown around, I said, "What? That's the first 18 years of my life. I got that down to a science, But the difference between what it was like for me and perhaps for many of us growing up on the spectrum and what's happening now is that I wasn't going out then because I didn't have a choice. I didn't have friends, and I was lonely, and it was involuntary. And now I have, we're choosing social isolation, and I'm choosing not to go out because I do have friends and because I want to protect the people that I care about. And we think about movies like Revenge of the Nerds, or these other kind of revenge fulfillment things where it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to stick it to all the people who bullied me when I was growing up. And I've decided, what? I care about those people. Even if they didn't care about me, even if they didn't ever invite me to go out and do things with them and go to parties, I care about them. And so I'm going to do this to protect them because dang nabbit, I'm in this world and I can do this. But of course, we know social isolation, my God, I'm tripping over this phrase, excuse me, is not without its perils, especially for folks on the spectrum. So so we have to think about the benefits and the drawbacks of social distancing, right? So on the one hand, one of the biggest challenges that folks on the spectrum face is in kind of the face-to-face interactions and trying to make eye contact, trying to read people's body language, and picking up on all these nonverbal cues. And so when you have to if you're only able to be maintaining in contact from a distance online or on the phone, all of that goes away. All that is taken away, right? So instead of worrying about people's cues and body language and things, you can really focus on the person, right? This is what they say, like sometimes when all that is taken away, you just, all that's left is the person. You can really focus on the person instead of all this other information that's coming in about them, because there's often a lot of sensory information as well when we're dealing with people face to face. The color of their hair, what they're wearing, if they have any cologne on, whew, all those things disappear now when we're doing the social distancing. But the drawback then also is that there's a unique kind of connection that does occur in person that you can't replicate with online, right? And it can be more difficult to establish that intimacy, that closeness. So I know for myself, when I was younger, I wanted to establish emotional closeness with people, like with guys I had crushes on, let's say in particular. And I did not know how to do this. I did not have the skills to do this. I didn't understand how to establish emotional intimacy. So I would compensate with physical closeness. A guy I liked would be sitting at the computer, and this is when I was 16 and he was 14, maybe roughly. And he'd say, "Oh, Amy, I got something I want to show you. Come over here." So I'd come over. "Oh, okay, what is it?" So he's sitting here and I'm all up in his personal bubble, right? I'm all over him, trying to create this closeness that I want to have with him. But because I don't know how to create it emotionally, I'm trying to create it physically. Now, if I'm socially isolated, I can't even do that. I can't even, if I want to, try to be close to somebody and I don't know how to create that emotional connection, I can't just compensate by, using the physical in whatever way. So it's a whole different set of parameters. And the very thing we see here in this photo, right? The touch that she's doing on the guy's face, touch is such an incredibly powerful thing. Obviously, everybody has different tolerance levels and feelings about being touched, and some people are more sensitive to it, but it's one of the ways that we as humans form connection, physical touch. It's letting the other person know that you feel safe with them, you trust them. I trust you enough to touch me this way, to be close to me. And now we can't kind of enter into that when we're dealing with social distancing. So how do we let someone know that it's okay? I trust you, I feel close to you, right? And I'm a very tactile person. I'm a hugger from way back, so this is kind of killing me a little bit because I just want to hug everybody and be like, it's gonna be okay, but you're contagious, so go over there. It's tough, right? Again, we all have different feelings about hugging and all that stuff. So how do we bring about that closeness without kind of some of those things that we're used to falling back on? And how then can autistic individuals make connections in this era of isolation, right? It's all too easy for those of us who already are, not big social animals, to become even more isolated and consequently lonely in times like this. And so I think it's very important that we draw that line between like being alone but then becoming lonely, right? It's possible to socially isolate but not be lonely. But it can be very hard when you are, under this kind of, well, duress might be the wrong word, but you don't have the choice to break that social isolation. The choice has been taken away. So that can be a bit overwhelming. So that's where the question comes in. How can we change that? Oops, sorry, wrong slide. And I wish I had a 100% clear answer here. I think it's a matter of checking in with your social networks, right? Texting people, FaceTiming people, like letting people know I am here, I care. I read something recently that Netflix is going to do a thing where you can have a movie party with your friends. You can like be on video and watch movies with people, right? That's another way of connecting with folks in this time of social isolation. So there are starting to be alternatives that maybe people can work with. But I think the biggest part, is the part that comes from within us, right? Because other people can only do so much for us. It's a matter of what we tell ourselves. What do we say? Well, you're like, I really like this person, and we were starting to build a relationship, and now we can't go within 6 feet of each other. And I'm gonna be completely frank here. You know, I talk about sexuality for a living. There's a lot of stuff you can do from 6 feet away. Trust me. Uh, it just takes imagination, right? It takes creativity, and but within that, you know, scope is the idea that you are trusting this person and they trust you, and that's sometimes that's the piece that's harder to get into place first before you get into all the other stuff. So it's all about just finding other ways of connecting with each other, right? And I guess, you know, saying like, let's make a promise to each other, like when this is over, when the, you know, we don't have to self-isolate anymore or social distance anymore, that we're going to be in each other's lives in some way or another, right? It's making a choice. It's making a choice to be in someone's life and someone choosing to be in your life. That's a big, big choice. And right now, again, there are limited ways for people to be in each other's lives, but there are still ways. We are so fortunate with this technology we have. Like, look at this. This is incredible. 100 years ago, when they had the Spanish influenza, none of this existed. It wouldn't have been possible. So we are extremely fortunate to have more opportunities to make those connections than ever before. But I'm hopeful that all autistic folks will continue to, you know, seek out your support circles. Go use the chats that GRASP is putting out there, which are an enormous resource. Talk to people, you know, in any place that you can. But again, I know there's a risk. You don't want to send people flying out into the world, but still reserve judgment. Still, you know, your time is still valuable. Even if all your time is at home all the time now, your time is still valuable. You are still valuable. So don't, you know, give yourself all away to people who don't deserve you, if that makes any sense, right? But take the time to seek out those quality connections, the connections that really matter, the ones that you're going to say, when this is all done, you know, when we graduate Corona High School and we're out of here and we're going off into the world, we're going to stay friends. All right. Write in each other's proverbial yearbooks and keep to it. And with any good fortune and luck, we'll get through this together, because I truly believe that we will. So thank you all so very much for your time and attention. This is my contact information. If you want to send me an email, if you have any questions, and I can answer questions now. Obviously, I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. So please feel free.
That was great, Amy. As always, very great. And I think it's amazing that you were able to change everything around your discussion today to talk about that. I love in the time of coronavirus, by the way. That's just fantastic. So, okay, I have a couple questions here. So one from one of our participants just said that they thought it was just such an important and cool job, and that was, I just wanted to relay that. Also, Hope, who is from one of our support groups in Nassau County, wanted to know if you had anything to say about sexual, or like if somebody is interested in a sexual or romantic relationship, is more considers themselves an asexual person, you know, what do you have, you know, can you comment on that?
Absolutely. So I always make this clear in my regular presentation. I apologize if I didn't this time, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with being asexual or aromantic. There's plenty of folks who are not interested in having a relationship or having sex, and that is absolutely okay. I just find that what happens a lot is that has become the stereotype of autistic people, is that we're all asexual. And so I'm constantly on the warpath trying to bust that that stereotype. And you are not required to be a sexual being, Hope. Like, first and foremost, let me tell you, and it's very hard, especially as women in our society, regardless of whether we're on the spectrum or not, we are held to society standards of what a woman is supposed to be and how women are treated by others in our society. And so, oh good Lord, sorry, that was a motorcycle flying by my window. So I made a conscious choice, or maybe it was unconscious, couldn't really tell you, but I decided that I was not going to be a piece of meat, that my choice to be a sexual being was for my sake and not for anyone else's. was because I wanted to enjoy sex. I wanted to enjoy pleasure, not because somebody else was telling me I had to, or because guys wanted to have sex with me. That was a decision that I made. So it's a personal decision for each person whether or not they want to engage in sex or in a relationship. And you have every right to not want to do that. Like there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And that can be a difficult discussion, obviously, to have with a partner. I feel it's something that should happen kind of early on when you're starting to be into someone and starting to get into a relationship. But that's, again, I wish I had more time to cover all the ways to talk about that. It's a very extensive topic. So, but you have every right, absolutely, to be asexual or aromantic, 100%.
Great. So a couple other things. Can you talk about, it says, Julie mentioned, do you have any tips for sexual success with sensory issues? Like they said, noise, etc.
Sure, sure, absolutely. Well, so sensory issues are a huge thing. And that can be a barrier, obviously, to having sex. I have found I've been able to use my sensitivities to my benefit. I'm very sensitive to touch, obviously. My back is actually the biggest erogenous zone on my whole body, and that has been a good thing and a bad thing in varying permutations. But communication is really the key here. Like when you are being intimate with somebody, telling them, I like that, I don't like that, being able to say that to someone, but then also them respecting it, right? That's the other piece of the puzzle. So we can advocate for ourselves in the bedroom. We can say, I'm having these sensory challenges, but the other person needs to respect that as well. And if the person that you're with is not respecting your sensory issues, they don't deserve you. They're not a good person. They're not a nice person. Again, for if you're trying to acclimate to certain things so that you can become more comfortable in the bedroom, say that too. Say, okay, I want to get used to this, but I'm not used to this yet. Can we work on this very gradually, right? So take things in tiny increments. Again, I see you mentioned noise, Julie, and I'm, I love the noises. For me, one of the best parts of sex and sexuality is the sounds, even more than they say that men watch their porn and women read their porn, and I do read mine. And when I am reading and I'm thinking about the sounds, that does something for me because I'm imagining in my mind, I'm controlling that noise. But of course, in practice, when you're in the bedroom, you can't necessarily control the noises that someone else is making, right? So again, it's a matter of communication and saying that was an unexpected noise. Could you, well, I mean, it's hard to let someone know sometimes when you're going to make certain noises, but kind of just creating that line of communication and saying, like, is there any way that you could be a little quieter with that particular noise, or could you not do that right now, or just kind of advocating for yourself in that way. And again, if the person respects that, that's the real key there. But I think just with time and practice, it can be possible to work with those sensory issues. And again, it doesn't mean you have to overcome them entirely, but you can work with them and work with a partner who is willing to work with you to have sexual success in spite of those issues. So.
Thank you. So Erica wants to know if you have any resources for Christian autistics, and also if you have any, if you have any experience, I guess, with, any different religions. If yes, great, tell us. If not, we are more than happy to put some of those resources on the blog page with this post when we put it up.
I don't specifically have resources for Christian autistics. I know everybody, depending on people's religious background, some topics can be viewed as more or less taboo. I have found, especially when dealing with parents who say, we're from this religious background and we don't want to talk about masturbation. We think it's wrong and bad and make it go away. Like, you can't make that go away. That's something that's too reinforcing. And if you tell someone to stop doing that, A, they won't stop, or B, that behavior is going to come out in some other way at some other point and in a potentially harmful and dangerous way. So I regrettably don't have a whole lot of patience for folks who use religion as a way to disregard or overlook their child's sexuality, because unfortunately I think that can be used sometimes, especially when we're talking about individuals on the spectrum. parents are already uncomfortable talking about sex and sexuality with neurotypical kids. You add autism to the equation and it becomes an even more difficult discussion to have. So but for adults, for folks who are religious themselves, there may be some resources out there. I'm not sure, but yeah, maybe we can find something, Kate. I don't specifically know of any, but.
Well, we'll definitely do our research on that. Lindsay might have some also as well, and some of our other staff members who do the information and referral might have that, and I will make sure to post that. So I really appreciate the question. We have another question from Dan, who is wondering how you might, if you do counsel men on asking someone on a date, or, and generally that can be opened up to men and women too, but what has been the biggest challenge?
Sure. So I guess, Dan, you're referring to my thesis study that I did. There were two big challenges, I would say. One was that you expect you're going to have certain criteria met for the participants that you're going to have in a study, right? So you build it around that, right? And I imagined that I was going to have guys on the spectrum who were going to be, not very talkative, who weren't going to maybe know what to say, or going to be shy. What I got was guys on the spectrum who were extremely talkative, but nothing they were saying was ever going to get them a date ever. And so, but that, I mean, again, I'm not trying to bag on anyone, but it was the simple just nature of the things that they were saying were just, because what I did within the study was that I had them practice with an actor to practice asking out on a date. And then they would watch a video of what it was supposed to look like, and then watch a video of themselves, because they'd be recorded doing the asking out on a date, and then we would talk about the differences. So yeah, the social skills piece is a really big thing, and that was a big challenge. But the other big challenge, I would say, is that I had it set up so that if the participants did this and that, the person would say, yes, I'll go on a date with you. In the real world, you can do everything right and someone can still say, no, I don't want to go out with you, because people have free will. And so it's very hard to, and then all the time we see, for men, but for lots of folks, well, I followed all the rules and I'm still not getting a date, but that guy over there, he broke all the rules and he's getting all the dates. And unfortunately, I wish I had a reason why that happens. That's, it's not fair and it's not right. And so no matter how many rules you follow, you could still not get the outcome that you were hoping for. And so that was a big challenge. Like, how do we then prepare folks on the spectrum to deal with rejection, right? I have a lifetime's worth of experience with rejection. It's still painful, right? So how do we deal with that? How do we say, okay, even if you do all the things you're supposed to do, somebody can still say no? So that was one of the biggest challenges, I would say, to teaching that. And I hope to expand, by the way, what I did in that study to working with women as well on the spectrum. I wasn't able to cover that within the scope of the study and the resources I had and the time constraints I had, but I would love to expand that and do dating skills classes for both men and women on the spectrum.
Oh, great. Thanks, Amy. We have people who are just kind of commenting, making some comments. And so one thing that I was going to mention too is that, dating is not dissimilar from finding friends in a lot of ways. I think that for autistic people and people in general, it's really hard to find people who have similar interests to you. And so, which is kind of crazy to think, especially like for a city like New York City, that's so big, but it can be almost even more challenging to find people to be friends with. And so I found that if you have an interest, that you can find a meetup group or an activity group or something like that, where you can join that. You'll find other people who have interests similar to you, that you can be friends with, and that could possibly end up leading to something romantic. And I think that that's a really good place to start. So it can be, for friendship, it can be for romantic, and also, it's not just about men and women. We have a lot of people in our community, they're LGBTQAI. And so I think that, just to keep that in mind too, it's like for, somebody commented about encouraging gender mixed friendships. And I think it's just friendships in general, is a good place to start too. So I don't know if you wanted to comment about your experience or thoughts about activities with, interests.
Sure, sure, absolutely. You know, finding somebody with common interests is a great way to meet people, a great way to make friends, and then start to build relationships. That's a wonderful building block for sure. I saw the comment about encouraging friendships, gender mixed friendships, and I do feel that friendship is a solid foundation for a relationship. It's kind of the best place that you can really begin a relationship. You know, what we see in the movies, of course, also often is the love at first sight, and you know, it's all very theatrical and romantic, and there's music, and but the real world doesn't quite work that way. And so, uh, so it's definitely a great thing to start off by having friendships, and I think at you know, one of the problems we often do see with I mean I have always gotten along better with guys than girls. I have kind of a mix of friends now, but when I was younger I definitely had more male friends, or got along better with guys than I did with girls. But so sorry, reading the comments. Yes, so we do. It's very hard sometimes because we see, oh, people say men and women can't be friends. You know, there's no way, but they can. Friendship is a wonderful and important thing. It's a necessary thing to appreciate somebody as a human being and not just as somebody that you want to date or be romantic with. So, yeah, absolutely, 100% to building friendships.
So I'm kind of looking at, so we have a lot of people that are on our Facebook Live also. So I'm just like looking at different, different things, see if anybody has any other questions and things. So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to have any final comments, before we wrap up your talk, but you have a couple minutes if you wanted to do that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, were there any questions on the Facebook Live, or there were no questions?
No. The people that were on Facebook Live actually came on to the chat here, and so we've been working with them. But no, we don't have any questions at the moment. But I'm sure that we will have more as time goes on, and so if there's any of those questions, I can get those to you, and we can try to get those answered.
Yeah. No, that would be great. Like, obviously, please feel free to send me any questions that you might have. I'll just put up my email address one more time if anybody didn't get it before, so that you can send me an email. I'm also on Twitter or Facebook. So yes, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to do my best to answer them.
That's great. Thank you so much for that, Amy. So if you have nothing else, then I will go ahead and do some final comments before we wrap up the conference.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for your wonderful questions and your comments. I truly do appreciate it. So glad we could all still be here together, apart, together.
Thank you.